They thought the storm would make you easier to control. They were wrong. It did not make you softer. It did not make you weaker. It did not send you crawling back for closure, approval, or one more chance to be understood by people who already knew what they were doing. The storm did something far more dangerous. It removed the parts of you they knew how to use, the part that explained too much, the part that forgave too fast, the part that mistook silence for maturity, the part that stayed loyal to people who were only loyal to their access, the part that kept swallowing disrespect and calling it patience. That part of you did not survive, and that is why they feel something different now. They expected you to come back wounded. They expected you to come back bitter. They expected you to come back loud, angry, unstable, desperate to prove that you were not destroyed, but you came back quiet. That is what made them nervous. Not your anger, not your revenge, not your words, your calm. Because people who once controlled you through emotion do not fear your pain. They know how to handle your pain. They know how to provoke it, soften it, flatter it, and wait until it becomes forgiving again. What they fear is the moment your pain becomes discipline. That is when the old game ends. You did not just endure the storm, you became the threat. Not the threat of violence. Not the threat of cruelty. Not the childish threat of a man trying to look dangerous because he still feels powerless inside. You became the threat because you are no longer available for control. That is the Machiavellian line most people never understand. Power does not begin when you dominate others. Power begins when others can no longer dominate you through your own predictable weaknesses. If they know guilt controls you, they will use guilt. If they know loneliness controls you, they will use absence. If they know praise controls you, they will use approval. If they know disrespect makes you explode, they will use provocation. If they know you need to be understood, they will misunderstand you on purpose. And before the storm, maybe that worked. Maybe one cold message could ruin your night. Maybe one disrespectful joke could make you shrink. Maybe one person leaving could make you question your entire value. Maybe one accusation could make you write paragraphs to someone who was never looking for truth. But storms have a cruel way of teaching what comfort never could. The storm showed you that being good does not protect you from people who benefit from your goodness. It showed you that honesty is not always rewarded. It showed you that loyalty without boundaries becomes a leash. It showed you that some people do not love your heart. They love how little consequence there is for mishandling it. And once you see that, you cannot return to the old version of yourself. You may try for a while. You may try to be warm the same way. You may try to trust the same way. You may try to explain, forgive, and keep the peace like before. But something inside you no longer obeys. A colder intelligence begins to rise. It does not shout. It does not beg. It does not announce itself. It simply watches. And the more it watches, the more it understands. This is why the storm was not just pain. It was education. It was not just loss. It was removal. It did not destroy the man you were supposed to become. It destroyed the man you had been trained to remain. The harmless man. The agreeable man. The man who needed to be chosen. That man was useful to others, but dangerous to himself. He made your presence too available. He made your forgiveness too cheap. He made your reactions too easy to trigger. He made your plans too easy to read. He made your loyalty too easy to exploit. So the storm took him. And what remained was not evil. It was controlled. That is what they will never forgive you for. People can forgive your weakness because it gives them position. They can forgive your sadness because it gives them access. They can even forgive your anger because anger is still a reaction, and reaction means they can still reach you. But control makes you unfamiliar. Control makes you difficult to use. Control makes the old map useless. They come looking for the wound and find a wall. They come looking for the old reaction and find silence. They come looking for the man who used to explain himself and find a closed door. That is the threat. Not that you want to destroy them, that they can no longer destroy you. Remember this line, I am what the storm created. Say it like a private vow, because this story is not about becoming darker for attention. It is about becoming clearer than the people who tried to keep you confused. And clarity is dangerous. A confused man can be led. A needy man can be bought. A reactive man can be baited. A lonely man can be summoned. A man hungry for approval can be owned by anyone willing to feed him crumbs. But a clear man is difficult. He asks what things cost. He watches what people do when access is reduced. He studies the gap between words and behavior. He no longer mistakes emotional intensity for loyalty. He no longer confuses a familiar cage with home. This is where your transformation begins. Not in revenge, in refusal. You refuse to be moved by every hand that reaches for your weakness. You refuse to call disrespect a misunderstanding. You refuse to give the full version of yourself to people who only earned the surface. You refuse to keep bleeding just because someone got comfortable with the sight of your blood. That refusal is the first breath of power. Machiavelli understood that men are not ruled only by morality. They are ruled by incentives, fear, advantage, weakness, hunger, and perception. If you enter the world pretending otherwise, you do not become noble. You become unprepared. The storm made you prepared. It showed you where you were open. It showed you where you were hungry. It showed you where you were begging without using the word. It showed you where your kindness had become permission. And then it closed those doors. That is why you are not the same man. You are not simply healed. You are not simply stronger. You are not simply over it. You are less accessible to the things that once owned you. And that is why the people who knew the old version of you will feel a strange psychological tension around the new one. They will not know where they stand. They will not know what you noticed. They will not know what you are planning. They will not know whether their old tricks still work. That uncertainty is not accidental. It is the weather you carry now. You did not just endure the storm. You became what the storm created. There is a version of you that had to die, not because he was bad, not because he was weak by nature, not because kindness itself was the problem. He had to die because his kindness had no gate. That is the difference most men learn too late. A good man with boundaries is respected. A good man without boundaries becomes a resource. People lean on him. They drain him. They confess to him. They return when they are empty. They disappear when he needs something back. And because he wants to be good, he tells himself it is fine. He calls overextension generosity. He calls emotional neglect patience. He calls humiliation humility. He calls being chosen last loyalty. That is how the harmless man survives. He survives by renaming pain until it sounds like virtue. But the body knows. The body knows when a conversation makes you smaller. The body knows when a smile is hiding contempt. The body knows when someone is keeping you close enough to use, but not close enough to honor. The body knows when you are performing peace, while something inside you is slowly turning cold. And one day, the lie stops working. That day is not always loud. Sometimes it happens in a quiet room after another small disrespect. Nothing dramatic. No final betrayal. No cinematic explosion. Just a sentence, a glance, a delay, a pattern you have seen too many times. And something inside you says, enough. That is when the harmless man begins to die. He dies when you stop laughing at jokes that cut you. He dies when you stop explaining your boundary like it needs permission. He dies when you stop rewarding people with access after they show you contempt. He dies when you realize that being easy to be around is not the same as being respected. This is not bitterness, it is recognition. And recognition is the first stage of Machiavellian maturity. Because Machiavelli did not write for men who wanted the world to be fair. He wrote for men who understood that the world often rewards appearance, leverage, timing, and control more than pure intention. That does not mean you abandon morality. It means you stop offering morality as a substitute for strategy. The harmless man believes people will respect his goodness once they understand it. The strategic man understands that goodness must be protected by consequence, or it becomes an invitation. That truth makes people uncomfortable because it challenges the story they want to tell about themselves. Everyone likes to believe they value kindness, but many people only value kindness when it remains useful. They value the man who listens until he begins to speak. They value the man who forgives until he remembers. They value the man who stays until he learns to leave. They value the man who gives until he attaches a standard to his giving. Then suddenly, he has changed. No, he has stopped being convenient. That is the real offense. If this part feels personal, it is because most men have lived it. They have been praised for being strong while silently being abandoned. They have been called mature because they did not complain. They have been called loyal because they stayed too long. They have been called good because they made other people's lives easier at the cost of their own self-respect. This is where the storm becomes honest. It tells you that some of your suffering was not proof of love. It was proof of poor negotiation with yourself. It tells you that your fear of losing people made you lose yourself first. It tells you that you were not always being noble. Sometimes you were just afraid of the emptiness that would come after choosing yourself. That truth hurts. But it also frees you, because once you see the mechanism, you can stop worshipping the wound. The harmless man says, "Why did they do this to me?" The dangerous man asks, "What did I allow because I was afraid to stand alone?" That question changes everything. It does not blame you for their betrayal. It does not excuse their behavior. It simply returns your power to the only place it can be rebuilt, your own choices. You cannot control who lies, but you can control how quickly words become access. You cannot control who disrespects you, but you can control whether disrespect receives your presence. You cannot control who underestimates you, but you can control whether you interrupt their mistake too early. This is why the death of the harmless man is necessary. Until he dies, every lesson becomes another emotional speech. You understand the pattern, but still obey it. You see the red flags, but still bargain with them. You know the person is unsafe, but still hand them the softest parts of you. That is not compassion. That is self-betrayal, wearing a gentle voice. The new man does not need to be cruel. He simply needs to become difficult to access without respect. He needs to make forgiveness meaningful by refusing to give it automatically. He needs to make loyalty sacred by giving it only where it is matched by behavior. This is the part many people call cold, but cold is not always the opposite of love. Sometimes cold is what happens when wisdom finally enters a room that emotion used to run. And wisdom does not beg. Wisdom watches. It watches who changes when you stop overgiving. It watches who becomes offended by your boundary. It watches who only misses you when your usefulness disappears. It watches who wants the old version back because the new one requires accountability. That is when you begin to understand perception. People did not always see you as kind. Some saw you as safe. Some saw you as predictable. Some saw you as emotionally affordable. Some saw you as a man they could mishandle without meaningful loss. The storm ended that perception. Now they must recalculate. And recalculation makes people uneasy, because the man they knew how to manage is no longer answering the door. He is buried under the storm. And what stands in his place is not asking to be liked before he protects himself. He is calm. He is selective. He is watching. He is what the storm created. The next lesson is not revenge. It is containment. A man who cannot contain himself cannot protect himself. His emotions spill into every room. His plans leave his mouth before they have roots. His pain becomes public information. His anger becomes a predictable button. His need for validation becomes a handle anyone can grab. Most men do not lose power in one dramatic failure. They leak it, a little through over-explaining, a little through nervous laughter, a little through telling the wrong person too much, a little through reacting to insults that deserved only a stare, a little through announcing moves that should have stayed hidden. Then they wonder why people keep knowing exactly where to strike. The answer is simple. They handed out the map. This is why the mask matters. Not a fake personality, not dishonesty, not pretending you have no emotions. A mask is a border. It is the discipline of deciding who gets the full truth, who gets the surface, and who gets nothing. That is a difficult lesson for men who were taught that openness is always strength. Openness can be strength, but only with people who have earned it. Openness in the wrong room is not bravery, it is exposure. And exposure, in the presence of hidden motives, becomes weakness. You do not owe everyone your inner world. You do not owe every curious person your history. You do not owe every critic your explanation. You do not owe every admirer your trust. You do not owe every apology a restored connection. This is where your face becomes a locked door. When they insult you, you do not rush to prove that it did not hurt. That still gives them the satisfaction of movement. You let the silence stretch. You let their words sit in the air until the room can hear how small they are. When they praise you, you do not become intoxicated. Praise is not always respect. Sometimes praise is a key someone tries in your lock. They want to know if admiration makes you careless. They want to know if flattery opens what criticism could not, so you receive it calmly. You do not expand for praise. You do not collapse under criticism. You do not let either one write your next move. This is the beginning of internal control. And internal control creates external uncertainty. People fear what they cannot predict. They can handle the angry man because anger has rhythm. They can handle the needy man because need has direction. They can handle the insecure man because insecurity has a price. But the contained man unsettles them because he does not reveal what currency moves him. This is why silence is pressure. Most people cannot sit inside silence without trying to fill it. They explain more than they planned. They soften their own accusation. They reveal their insecurity. They expose the motive behind the question. They negotiate against themselves because your stillness gives them nothing to push against. That is why silence is not empty. Silence is refusal. You refuse to provide data. You refuse to reward provocation. You refuse to turn every wound into a performance. You refuse to make your mental space available to people who only want to disturb it. This is where the old version of you would have failed. He would have defended himself to someone committed to misunderstanding him. He would have sent the long message. He would have explained the pain. He would have tried to make the other person admit what they did. The new version understands something colder. Some people already know. They do not need explanation. They need distance. That single realization saves years of energy. Because explanation is expensive. Every time you explain your wound to the wrong person, you reopen it for someone who may only be studying how deep it goes. Every time you prove your sincerity to someone invested in doubting you, you teach them that your peace is negotiable. Every time you respond to bait, you confirm that bait still works. So you become quiet. Not wounded quiet. Not dramatic quiet. Not the kind of silence that secretly hopes someone will chase. Strategic quiet. The kind that gathers information. The kind that protects timing. The kind that lets people reveal themselves. The kind that makes your presence feel heavier because your words are no longer cheap. That is when the room changes. People begin to choose their words more carefully. They begin to watch your face. They begin to wonder whether you noticed more than you said. They begin to feel that the old emotional contract has expired. And it has. Before, your reactions were available on demand. Now, they are earned. This is why the mask and silence must work together. The mask protects the signal. Silence protects the strategy. Together, they create a new perception around you. You become less readable, less baitable, less emotionally affordable. That does not make you fake. It makes you governed. And a governed man is dangerous to anyone who depends on chaos. Because chaos needs your participation. Drama needs your reaction. Manipulation needs your hunger. Disrespect needs your tolerance. A toxic pattern cannot continue unless some part of you keeps returning to play your assigned role. Silence ends the role. The mask closes the door. And when the door closes, people discover whether they respected you or only enjoyed access to you. That discovery is rarely peaceful. Some will call you cold. Some will call you arrogant. Some will say you changed. Some will try to provoke warmth out of you by accusing you of having none. Let them. A boundary will always look like cruelty to the person who benefited from its absence. That line is not decoration. It is human nature. People often do not hate your strength. They hate the inconvenience your strength creates for them. They hate that your new restraint forces them to meet a version of you they cannot easily pressure, flatter, guilt, or read. That is the threat, not the mask itself. The fact that they no longer know what is behind it. You are not lying. You are withholding what no longer belongs to everyone. You are not hiding from life. You are refusing to be consumed by every room you enter. You are not emotionless. You are no longer emotionally public. This is what the storm taught you. The full version of you is valuable, so stop giving it to people who only know how to spend it. There is a betrayal that does not merely hurt you, it changes your eyesight. Before it happens, you believe certain things because you need the world to feel livable. You believe closeness means loyalty. You believe history means protection. You believe apologies mean change. You believe someone who knows your pain would never use it against you. Then the storm removes the blindfold, and suddenly you see too much. You see the calculation behind the compliment. You see the delay before someone celebrates you. You see the warmth that disappears when you stop being useful. You see the person who says they love you, but only loves the version that keeps them comfortable. You see that some people did not betray you in one moment. They were leaving in small ways long before they admitted it. That is the brutal gift. Betrayal gives you vision. At first, you may hate that vision. It makes the world less innocent. It makes dinner tables quieter. It makes old friendships feel different. It makes certain words sound lighter than they used to. You hear, I care about you, and instinctively search for behavior strong enough to hold the sentence. This is not paranoia. This is the cost of seeing. And seeing has a price. The old version of you could trust quickly because he did not know what certain smiles could hide. The new version cannot unknow it. He has seen too much timing, too much convenience, too much affection that appeared when it needed access and disappeared when it required sacrifice. That loneliness is real, but it is better than blindness. This is where many men waste betrayal. They turn it into bitterness. They say people are fake, love is useless, trust is weakness, and everyone is out for themselves. That sounds strong for a moment, but it is actually lazy. It turns one painful lesson into a permanent excuse not to develop discernment. Bitterness is not wisdom. It is pain refusing to become precise. Wisdom asks better questions. What did I ignore? What did I want so badly that I edited the evidence? Where did I confuse intensity with loyalty? Where did I mistake being needed for being valued? Where did I give trust because I was lonely, not because it was earned? This is where the story becomes deeper than revenge. Betrayal does not only expose the betrayer, it exposes the part of you that needed the illusion. That is a hard truth. Some people will reject it because it threatens the clean story, where they were only innocent and the other person was only cruel. But growth begins where clean stories break. Their betrayal may not be your fault, but your future depends on understanding why the door stayed open so long. That is not self-blame, it is self-recovery. Machiavelli would not tell you to cry forever over the snake. He would tell you to study the snake. Study how it entered. Study what warmth you mistook for safety. Study what language softened your judgment. Study what weakness in you made the pattern possible. Then close the gate. Without a speech. That is the part the old you would not have understood. He wanted the final conversation. He wanted the confession. He wanted them to admit the damage. He wanted the betrayer to become honest enough to make the wound feel meaningful. But the new you understands that closure from a dishonest person is just another negotiation with the same illusion. So you take the lesson without asking them to bless it. You stop needing the person who injured you to validate the injury. You stop bringing your wound back to the person who taught you why it exists. You stop waiting for someone with hidden motives to suddenly become pure because your pain was well explained. That is when betrayal becomes training. It trains your perception. It trains your patience. It trains your silence. It trains your ability to separate words from cost. It trains you to watch what people do when they no longer benefit from pretending. And once that training enters your bones, you become difficult to deceive in the same way. Not impossible, but difficult. That matters. Because human nature is not solved by one heartbreak, one betrayal, or one lesson. Human nature is complex. People contain fear, hunger, vanity, love, weakness, envy, loyalty, and self-interest in the same body. The mistake is not recognizing darkness in people. The mistake is pretending darkness disappears because someone speaks beautifully. You do not become wise by hating people. You become wise by measuring them. You measure consistency. You measure cost. You measure behavior under pressure. You measure what changes when you say no. You measure whether their respect survives your boundary. That is the new vision. And this is why they cannot play you the same way anymore. They may bring the same words. They may wear the same smile. They may offer the same apology. They may try to reopen the same emotional door. But the man who answers now is not the one they trained. He listens differently. He waits longer. He trusts slower. He believes behavior over performance. He understands that some people do not return because they love you. They return because the world outside your access was not as warm as they expected. That truth will start arguments. Good. Some truths should, because the point is not to make everyone comfortable. The point is to make the pattern visible. And once it is visible, it loses power. This is how betrayal becomes part of the threat. Not because it made you hateful, because it made you accurate. And an accurate man is dangerous to manipulation. He does not need to accuse. He does not need to expose. He does not need to announce what he sees. He simply adjusts. Access changes. Tone changes. Distance changes. The future changes. And the person who thought they only wounded him eventually discovers that they educated him. That is the punishment they never expected. Not revenge. Irrelevance. They become a lesson. And you become what the storm created. The storm can make you see. The mask can protect you. Betrayal can train you. But none of it matters if you are still governed by need. Need is the leash. That sentence explains more relationships than most people want to admit. The person who needs approval can be controlled by praise. The person who needs love can be controlled by absence. The person who needs belonging can be controlled by rejection. The person who needs money without options can be controlled by fear. The person who needs to be seen as good can be controlled by guilt. This is why becoming the threat requires more than attitude. It requires independence. Not fake independence. Not the kind where a man says he does not need anyone while secretly checking who noticed his absence. Not the kind where he calls himself detached, but builds his entire identity around being unreachable. Real independence is quieter. It is the ability to stand without begging life to mirror you back. It is emotional independence, financial independence, social independence, psychological independence. It is the ability to love without losing your center, to work without worshipping the workplace, to belong without surrendering your standards, to be alone without treating loneliness like an emergency. That is rare, and because it is rare, it creates power. People can sense when you are no longer negotiating from hunger. Your tone changes, your timing changes, your tolerance changes. You no longer accept emotional crumbs as proof of connection. You no longer confuse a paycheck with permission to be disrespected. You no longer keep friendships that require you to remain smaller than your real size. This is where your life begins to rearrange. But it will not rearrange through desire. It rearranges through discipline. Discipline is the knife that cuts the leash. Without discipline, pain becomes poison. You become suspicious, reactive, bitter, and proud. You may sound powerful, but inside, the same weaknesses still hold the keys. A little attention can still pull you. A little disrespect can still ignite you. A little loneliness can still send you back. With discipline, pain becomes structure. You build the body you kept postponing. You build the skill that gives you options. You build the money that gives you refusal power. You build the routine that keeps your mood from ruling your mission. You build the silence that prevents your wound from speaking first. This is where the threat becomes real, not in words, in habits. A man who cannot govern his appetite will be governed by anyone who learns how to feed it. A man who cannot govern his anger will be governed by anyone who learns how to provoke it. A man who cannot govern his loneliness will be governed by anyone who learns when to appear and disappear. This is why self-control is not motivational advice. It is defense. Every weakness you refuse to discipline becomes a doorway, and the world is full of people who do not need to break down your wall if you leave the door open for comfort, lust, validation, rage, nostalgia, or fear. Machiavellian power begins when you stop pretending your inner life is private from consequence. Your habits are political. Your impulses are strategic liabilities. Your cravings are possible entry points. Your need for approval is a security breach. That sounds severe because it is. The world does not only attack men through enemies, it attacks through appetites, through distraction, through easy pleasure, through endless noise, through the soft invitation to remain almost who you could be, almost disciplined, almost focused, almost free, almost dangerous. Almost is where men disappear. They do not fall all at once. They fall through repeated negotiations with the weaker self. One skipped promise, one returned message, one unnecessary argument, one night of scrolling that becomes a season, one compromise that teaches the soul a lower standard. These are not small things. They are rehearsals for defeat. The man who becomes the threat treats small things seriously because he understands that identity is built in private, not in the speech, not in the moment of applause, not in the dramatic declaration that he has changed, in the morning when nobody knows, in the silence when nobody claps, in the choice not to respond, in the refusal to return, in the work done before the world has evidence. That is where the new man is built, and that is why he becomes unsettling. People who knew the old you may not see the work, but they feel the result. Your need has decreased. Your emotional availability has narrowed. Your standards no longer bend as easily. Your attention has become expensive. Your body carries different evidence. Your words come slower. Your absence carries more weight. They may not understand how it happened. You will. It happened when you stopped turning pain into drama and started turning it into architecture. This is where many men fail the paradox. They want to become the threat, so others will regret them. But if regret is the goal, you are still orbiting the people who hurt you. You are still letting their eyes decide whether your transformation is real. The true threat does not need witnesses. He trains because he said he would. He leaves because the pattern is clear. He stays silent because words would lower the price of his peace. He builds because his future deserves more than emotional revenge. That is self-rule. And self-rule is the foundation of every serious form of power. Need makes you available. Discipline makes you selective. Selection changes perception. Perception changes treatment. Treatment changes your life. This is the chain most men never complete. They want better treatment without changing their access. They want respect without consequence. They want power without restraint. They want a new life while obeying the same impulses that built the old one. The storm will not finish the work for you. It only shows you what must die. Discipline buries it. So if the storm took the harmless man, discipline builds the dangerous one. Not dangerous because he harms others. Dangerous because he cannot be handled cheaply. Dangerous because his loneliness is not for sale. Dangerous because his approval cannot be bought with flattery. Dangerous because his anger cannot be rented by provocation. Dangerous because the leash is cut, and the hand that once held it is empty. Now, look back at the man who entered the storm. He was not stupid. He was not weak. He was not broken beyond repair. He was untrained. He had not yet learned that kindness needs a gate. He had not yet learned that silence can be pressure. He had not yet learned that betrayal can sharpen perception. He had not yet learned that need is a leash and discipline is the knife. So life taught him in the most brutal language available. Loss, disrespect, absence, betrayal, underestimation. The kind of pain that makes a man sit alone and realize he cannot return to the same way of being without betraying himself again. That is where transformation becomes final. Not when the pain stops. When the old pattern stops working, the guilt trip no longer moves you. The cold message no longer controls your night. The fake apology no longer opens the door. The insult no longer rents your nervous system. The praise no longer makes you careless. The silence of another person no longer feels like a verdict on your worth. That is how you know the storm has finished its real work. It did not remove your heart. It removed the handles. And without the handles, the old world cannot hold you the same way. This is the final meaning of the title. You did not just endure the storm. Endurance would mean you survived and returned to the same emotional architecture. But you did not return the same. The storm changed the structure. It closed doors. It hardened standards. It made your inner world less public. It taught your eyes to measure behavior. It taught your nervous system that not every signal deserves obedience. You became the threat because the version of you they could use no longer exists. That is why some people will resent your peace. Your peace proves they were never as necessary as they wanted to be. Your silence proves they no longer own the conversation. Your distance proves access was a privilege, not a permanent right. Your discipline proves pain did not make you collapse. It made you organize. This is not revenge. Revenge still needs the other person. This is release. And release is colder because it removes them from the center. A man seeking revenge still cares about the emotional reaction of his enemy. He wants them to see, regret, hurt, understand, or suffer. But a man who has truly become what the storm created is not waiting for their recognition. Their regret may come. It may not. Their apology may arrive. It may not. Their opinion may change. It may not. None of it is the foundation anymore. That is the part that cannot be faked. Many men pretend not to care while secretly building their entire transformation for an audience. They want the ex to watch, the enemy to notice, the old friends to regret, the family to admit they were wrong. That is natural, but it is not freedom. Freedom begins when the work remains sacred, even if nobody claps. That is the quiet terror of the new man. He does not need the room to understand him before he moves. He does not need the past to apologize before he builds. He does not need the people who underestimated him to witness the full process. He can become in silence and let the results speak only when it is too late to stop. This is where the enemy loses. Not because you attack them, because their influence expires. They may still speak. They may still judge. They may still carry an old version of you in their mind. They may still believe you are the man they once knew how to provoke. Let them. Never interrupt someone who is underestimating you. They are giving you room to move. That is one of the cleanest Machiavellian advantages in life. An enemy who fears you prepares. An enemy who underestimates you relaxes. and a relaxed enemy reveals his assumptions. He stops watching closely. He builds his strategy around a ghost. The old you. Let him. Let them prepare for the man who no longer answers the door. Meanwhile, you build quietly. You become stronger quietly. You earn quietly. You study quietly. You detach quietly. You heal without turning healing into a performance. You let your absence become normal before your rise becomes obvious. Then one day, the room changes. Not because you announce it, because they feel it. The man they expected to react does not react. The man they expected to need does not need. The man they expected to explain does not explain. The man they expected to return does not return. The man they expected to remain emotionally affordable has become expensive. And that is when they understand. They did not just hurt you, they trained you. They did not just betray you, they clarified you. They did not just underestimate you, they gave you cover. They did not just create pain, they created a man who learned how pain becomes power when it is placed under discipline. This is why you do not need to become cruel. Cruelty is often just pain, looking for somewhere to go. You do not need that anymore. You have direction, you have standards, you have restraint, you have a future that no longer asks the past for permission. That is enough. You can still love, but not blindly. You can still forgive, but not automatically. You can still trust, but not without evidence. You can still be kind, but not without a gate. You can still feel deeply, but your feelings no longer govern the kingdom. That is the man the storm created. Not emotionless, unowned, not heartless, guarded, not bitter, accurate, not loud, unmoved. And if this story helped you see Machiavellian power differently, don't just leave with the lesson. Subscribe to Money Logic, because every week we break down the money decisions that look normal on the surface, but quietly shape your wealth for years. Like the video if you want more real Machiavellian power math, and subscribe now so you don't miss the next breakdown. Disclaimer: this content is for entertainment and educational, informational purposes only, and is not financial, medical, legal, or psychological advice. They thought the storm would end you. It ended their access.